Brandon Marshall versus his ex-cos from the Pivot, Fred and Channing. Let's talk about it. It's a lot to unpack in this situation, man, and I believe this is a very, very fascinating situation when it comes to the businesses in podcasting that I wanted to touch on. So, just for context, Brandon Marshall, he was a guest on Cam Newton's podcast, I want to say earlier this week, and I finally got a chance to check out what he had to say. And he claimed on there that Fred and Channing never put a single dollar into I Am Athlete, but still wanted 25% ownership, which to that Fred answered the following.
Real question is, where are those people that started with it? You know, me and Channing, Ocho, all the other people that were on the show that he wanted to recruit after Channing and I left. Everybody disappeared. And if you were right, if you stood for anything, if your integrity was high, then people will still, rock with you. But nobody's there right now.
So you heard what Fred had to say, and I wanted to address one point before we dive deeper, is the cloud chasing point. He may have a point there. I never really looked at I Am Athlete's number. I just assumed they were still doing great, although I'm personally more of a fan of the Pivot. I check out the Pivot more. I believe that the content is better. I like the host dynamic better. I believe also that they provide a safer space for the guests. And Wallow said something once when he was invited there. He said that they provided an open space for the guests to actually bleed on there. And that's very true. On the Pivot podcast, a lot of time I see guests go out there and really laying all out, crying even sometimes. On I Am Athletes, it's not that deep. The conversations are more surface level. And you can see, if you compare the numbers between the two entities, that one in the Pivot is doing great, and I Am Athlete is pretty much dying, y'all. They have over 1 million subscribers, and they have not hit 100,000 views in over a month, which is just not good for such a big platform. So the cloud chasing part of it, and him calling out, Shannon Sharp or being on his, interview tour, may be a reflection of these numbers and Brandon trying to get the cloud up. So maybe. But yeah, let's take a trip down memory lane. I wanted to do that and revisit the breakup to see who's right and who's wrong and what actually took place. So I identified two clips, one from Fred, one from Brandon Marshall, that in my opinion pretty much put this whole situation in a nutshell. So take this trip with me, and then we're going to come back and react and give our whole thoughts about the breakup and what went wrong actually. But before I play this clip, please like the video and subscribe to the channel.
From the start, I myself expressed ownership, right? And we really couldn't get the business button up and come to an agreement of what those percentages look like.
Yeah. And it keeps growing each week.
See, but that's where it shouldn't be the case because there's a filibuster, happening right in front of me.
Right.
I'm sitting here like, what the fuck? My sweat is traveling alongside the growth of the podcast. So I deferred every dollar, from a talent standpoint back into the company. Mm-hmm. So that travels with the company and the business and the valuation. But if I can't get the same valuation, where the thought commenced, right? Where we all started, then there's a problem. So those numbers weren't valued appropriately, and I felt that was a bit of slap in the face. Mm-hmm. And this is me just talking my own situation.
Yeah, absolutely. This is your own thing, absolutely.
No. And with that, the paperwork wasn't in place. We were trying to figure out that language and what that looked like, not just from an equity standpoint, because what was offered was revenue sharing. That's more of a partnership in my mind. That's not ownership. Mm-hmm. Equity is ownership. So the conversation was sort of overlapping and confusing from that side. I knew exactly what I signed up for. So when we couldn't see eye to eye on that, I said, you know what? Retroactively, pay me, and I'll step aside and we'll sign whatever agreements for name, image, likeness, so you can keep your content. Otherwise, I can be a dick and say, you know what? We never had any paperwork in place. Let's take down all this fucking content. Mm-hmm.
So that was Fred's version of the story. Now let's take a listen to what Brandon had to say.
couple years though. So like you got to understand where I was at. Okay.
Right.
I'm literally up at my dining room table with a bottle of Douce, thinking about like, damn, okay, well, how many people can we get in the building? What we can do, this and that, boom, boom, boom. So my pivot was I Am Athlete.
From HOA to even
When I talked to him,
makes
right? So that was the pivot,
right.
right? So then we go down the path. All right, so I'm gonna get to the 4%.
Right.
So we go down the path. I'm like, all right, what is all of this? This is working. I then took this business, this one little location, from 12,000 recurring monthly to 150 in 4 months. Now I'm shut down. The pandemic hit. I was about to open up number 2, number 3, number 4. I was in New York. I was in Houston.
I seen the
I was
plans.
everywhere.
Yeah, I seen them.
Then the pandemic hit. So now I'm sitting here like, all right, I got to put that on hold, but I still got 60, 70 employees. How do I not lay them off? Still
Right.
to this day, no one was laid off due to COVID, no nothing.
And I think
I was investing $150,000 every 2 weeks.
on payroll.
Still to this day with our boy Wilder say till this day. Bro,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? 'Cause I believe in the vision.
Yeah, for sure.
Because like I'm saying, I'm like you. Okay, not conservative.
Right.
I'm willing to put everything on the line.
Yeah, let's get it.
Right.
Yeah.
All right, so there you have it. The business side. I believe that there is one clear guy in the wrong in here, and I'm pretty sure everyone would agree with me that Brandon Marshall is wrong. Although he's getting way too much villainized for it, because I understand his perspective. Although he's still wrong. Here's why. Brandon Marshall pretty much states that he had to put all of the initial investments and that it was his own ideas. So then when another guy comes to him and asks for a quarter of the revenues while you didn't put a quarter of the money, it kind of looks crazy. So he comes up with the 4% offer, which Fred deemed a slap in the face, to quote what he said in the clip. So here's why Brandon Marshall is wrong. This situation reminds me a lot of the Joe versus Rory and Mal podcast, for those of y'all that follow it, with them starting off as friends, and the podcast or the product pretty much took off, not overnight because they've been on their grind for years, but the popularity just increased significantly out of nowhere. And then they end up in a Spotify deal. And when they weren't really making money, the money wasn't really a topic, so they kept doing it as friends. But ever since the money came in, now Joe didn't share the numbers, and Rory and Mal were under the impression that they were partners, when in fact they were employees. And this is why they broke up, and Joe didn't provide the numbers, etc. Y'all know the story, right? So this is why this situation reminds me of the same, and this is a lesson that I wish we just took away from all of these situations that we see with podcasts, and that we would apply these to our own lives. A lot of people say that they wouldn't make businesses with their friends, and that's not true. You want to do business with your friends, but you want to keep in mind that this is a business first. Do not stop working unless the paperwork is done. Be professional. Because at the end of the day, especially if you're the boss, which would have been Brandon Marshall in that situation, you have to be professional, protect yourself, and make it clear to your partner, especially if you got love for him, what it is that you intend to do. You can't go in a situation being like, yeah, let's do something. And as friends, if I'm on the other side, I don't assume that I'm going to be your employee. I'm assuming that we're going to be partners. If one of my friends comes to me and said, let's build something, it doesn't matter that it was your idea. You may, claim 60 and I get 40% of it just because it was your idea, but we're partners. You're not my boss unless you tell me. And then if you really have love for me, you have to give me that opportunity to actually say no. Otherwise, it looks like you're taking advantage of me. And this is exactly what happened. Fred is saying that, Brandon Marshall came in with the idea. He put the investment first, and then said, this is what we're going to do. And then it took off. The business went, the podcast took off running. Numbers looked great. Production looked great and everything, but they never touched on the paperwork. And at the end of the day, if you're the boss, it is your responsibility to make sure that everyone is on the same page, so you avoid misunderstandings and you avoid breakups and you avoid your employees or your partners leaving you. And your reputation is also at peace if you protect yourself with paperwork that you can lean back on. This is what Shannon said. I did not play that part, but he said, yeah, it's cool to go out there and claim, yeah, this wasn't paid, this wasn't done and everything, but you don't have any paperwork to prove anything. If you want to make these big ass claims, show the paperwork and then there's nothing else to say. To go back to the Joe, Rory, and Maul situation, Maul is saying the same thing. Joe, you're talking all that stuff. Where's the paperwork? You show me the paperwork, I'll apologize. But in both situations, Joe and Brandon Marshall cannot show the paperwork, so they instantly look crazy. And again, I can't stress that enough. If you're actually working with friends, brothers, or people you respect, the only way that you make the deal clean, you got to give the other or your partner or your employees, whoever, whatever the way you actually perceive these guys you're going to work with, the opportunity to say yes or no while being fully aware of what they're actually getting themselves into. So to go back to what Fred was saying, he was preaching ownership from the start, never got that. So once they had that conversation with Brandon Marshall, it was made clear to him that he was actually discussing revenue shares and not ownerships, meaning that he was actually an employee for this. So for Brandon Marshall to actually be mad that they never gave him any money, if I'm Fred, if I'm an employee, why in the hell am I going to put any amount of money into something that I do not own? It just doesn't work that way. In the corporate world, we all have jobs out there. You're not required to actually invest in your own company to get the job. That's on the boss. Now, if you're partners, it's a totally different conversation, but this is not what it was there. So obviously, Brandon Marshall, Shannon, Ocho, Reggie, or Fred, they wouldn't give you a penny as employees. They just wouldn't. So this is why Brandon Marshall is wrong in this situation, man. And again, I understand his perspective, because if it feels like you actually did most of the work prior, maybe you feel like you should make more money than the people who actually didn't put as much work as you. But for you to come back with that 4% number is indeed a slap in the face, because it kind of implies that, yeah, y'all ain't shit without me. This is me. And this is just not true. In fact, we can see that now that Shannon and Fred and Ryan Clark are moved away from you. They're doing the same stuff as you are, but way better. They're way more successful at it. Shadows Rosinko, who was with you, also left for the same guy that you call Whack, Shannon Sharp, and he's killing it also with the numbers. So yeah, man, Brandon Marshall, you need to be humble. And I know that a lot of people say, oh, publicity is good publicity, but no, man, you don't want to be the villain out there in the world, because I don't think that people are seeing all of these Brandon Marshall claims, Brandon Marshall beefs and everything, and running straight to I Am Athlete to check out the content. It may be the opposite, and you may actually kill off your own brand, so you want to be careful. So anyways, these are my thoughts. If you made it this far, I appreciate you. First of all, please like the video, please subscribe to the channel, and more importantly, get in that comment section and give me your thoughts about this whole thing. Who's right, who's wrong, whether we agree or not. Let's talk about it in the comment section. And I'm gonna do more of these videos about the business of the business side of the sports, because this is still sports related in my opinion, and this is just as fascinating as actually watching the games. I feel like more of this conversation about businesses need to happen on the internet. This is a lot to take away from everyone out there. So yeah, we can close the video right here, and I'll see you guys later. Peace.